This video is for 3.6 matrix multiplication. So we've done adding and subtracting and multiplying by a scalar. Now we're going to look at multiplying two matrices together. So the big thing that we have to make sure in order to be able to multiply is that if I look at my matrices, that the dimensions, the columns in the first one are equal to the rows in the second one. So for instance, if I have a 4 by 3, meaning 4 rows by 3 columns for matrix A, and a 3 by 2, since the 3's are the same, this one is possible. Now looking at a 5 by 1 and a 5 by 1, the 1 and the 5 are not equal, so this one is not possible. For C, 6 by 5, 5 by 2 is good, and a P by Q, if these represent numbers, and a Q by Z is also good. So the resulting matrix, okay, is always going to be the size of the outer two values. So if I looked at example A, if I had a 4 by 3 and a 3 by 2, if I multiplied these together, I should get out a 4 by 2 matrix. If I were to do B, I would get out a 5 by 1 matrix, and so on and so forth. So how do I multiply? I'm going to look at locations. So if I do, in this example here, matrix A times B, I have a 2 by 2 and a 2 by 2. So again, this is equal, and the outer two numbers, I'm going to get out a 2 by 2, and you'll see that here. So if I want the top left, I'm going to use, this would be considered row 1, column 1. So that's what I'm going to use in order to get the values that go within there. I'm going to use row 1, column 1. So I'm going to do first times first, in this case A times E plus B times G, and you can see that here, and so on and so forth. So if I look at an example with actual numbers in it, to get out a 2 by 2, so row 1, column 1, I'm going to do 3 times 4, and add to that 2 by 1. If I want to do row 2, column 1, then I'm going to use row 2 and column 1. So it's negative 1 times 4 plus 5 times 1, and so on and so forth. So let's try one together, and then I'll have you do the next one. So again, I've got a 2 by 2 and a 2 by 2, so these are equal, so we're good there, and I'm going to get out a 2 by 2. So I'm going to do row 1, column 1, that's this space here. I'm going to use row 1 and column 1. So I've got 4 times negative 2 is negative 8, plus 5 times 3 is 15. Row 1, column 1. Now if I want to do row 1, column 2, then I'm going to use row 1, column 2. So 4 times 0 is 0. 5 times 1 is 5. And now I want to do row 2, column 1. So I'm going to use row 2, column 1. 0 times negative 2 is 0. Negative 6 times 3 is negative 18. And now I've got row 2, column 2, so row 2, column 2. So I'm going to use 0 times 0 is 0. Negative 6 times 1 is negative 6. So I'm going to combine all that stuff together. So I've got negative 8 plus 15 is 7. 0 plus 5 is 5. 0 plus negative 18 is negative 18. And 0 plus negative 6 is negative 6. I want you to try B. Alright, let's go a little bit bigger. So we're going to do, in this case I've got 2 rows by 3 columns and 3 columns by 2 rows. So these numbers are the same. My outer two means I'm going to get out a 2 by 2 matrix. So in this case, if I know it's going to, I'm just going to put a little squiggly line here to represent the separation. Okay. I'm going to use row 1, column 1 for this first space. So I've got 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. I might need more space here, huh? Negative 4 plus middle times middle, so it's going to be negative 1 times 5 is negative 5. So it's going to be plus or just minus, and then 3 times 0. Okay, that is my row 1, column 1. If I do row 2, row 2, column 1, now I'm going to use this row in the same column I just used. So I've got 0 times negative 1 is 0, 2 times 5 is 10, 6 times 0 is 0. Okay, and then I've got row 1, column 2. So I'm going to use the 4, negative 1, 3, and the 0, 2, 3. So I've got 4 times 0 is 0, negative 1 times 2 is negative 2, and 3 times 3 is 9. And then row 2, column 2, 0 times 0, or 0 times 3, 0 times 0 is 0, 0 times 2, or 2 times 2 is 4, so I'm going to go 0 times 0, 2 times 2, 6 times 3. So all together, I'm going to get negative 4 minus 5 is negative 9. Negative 2 plus 9 is 7. 0 plus 10 plus 0 is 10. 0 plus 4 plus 18 is 22. Okay, one more. I want you to try B. So you have a 1 by 4 and a 4 by 1. So you should get out just a 1 by 1. It means one number goes in here. All right. So now we're going to look into something called the identity matrix, and we're still building towards how can I do these systems of equations that we've been doing the long, tedious way. How can I do them using matrices? So one thing we're going to need to know is something called the identity matrix. That means I have 1, 0, 0, 1 if it's a 2 by 2. So if I multiply any matrix by the identity matrix by another matrix, it doesn't change. So let's look at, given these 4 different matrices, we're going to multiply the A, and instead of putting the identity matrix in front, we're going to put it after. Let's see if that changes the matrix A at all. So I'm going to do I'm going to get out a 2 by 2. So I've got 3 times 1 is 3, plus 5 times 0 is 0, so that's just going to give me 3. Row 1, column 2 is row 1, column 2, so I've got 3 times 0 is 0, 5 plus 5 times 1 is 5. And then row 2, column 1, 12 times 1 is 12, plus 0. And then 12 times 0 plus negative 1 times 1. So notice it didn't matter which side I put the identity matrix on, it stayed the same. I'm going to do B for you, and then you will do C for yourself. So B, I'm going to multiply 3, 5, 12, negative 1 by negative 3, 2, 2, 6. And again, since I have a 2 by 2 and a 2 by 2, these are the same, so I can multiply, and I'm going to get out a 2 by 2. So first row, first column for the first space, I've got 3 times negative 3 is negative 9, plus 5 times 2 is 10. 3 times 2 is 6, and 5 times 6 is 30, so that's going to be my row 1, column 2. And then row 2, column 1, 12 times negative 3 is negative 36, and negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. And then row 2, column 2, 12 times 2 is 24, and negative 1 times 6 is negative 6. So all together, for this one, I'm going to get 1, 36, negative 38, and 18. So I want you to try B times A. Alright, now we're going to get a little bit more complicated. We're going to multiply by a scalar and then multiply through. Okay, so I'm going to take 3 times C. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that. 3 times C is going to give me 12, 15, 0, and negative 15. And I want to multiply that by the 3, the 5, the 12, the negative 1. Take a minute and try this one. So when you did this, I personally got 216, 45, negative 300, and 15. Hopefully you got the same thing as well. Okay, lastly, we're going to look at A times B times C. So I'm going to do these in order that I see them. So I'm going to do the 3, the 5, the 12, the negative 1, and I'm going to multiply that by the negative 3, the 2, negative 2, the 2, and the 6. And then whatever I get from that, multiply it by 4, 5, 0, and negative 5. Alright, so when I do that, when I did these two, we already did A times B in the last example, so that was 1, 36, negative 38, and 18. And I'm going to multiply that by the 4, the 5, the 0, and the negative 5. Alright, so that's going to be 1 times 4 is 4, plus 36 times 0 is 0. 1 times 5 is 5, plus excuse me, what is it? 36 times negative 5, that should be negative 180, I think. Okay, and then 4 times negative 38 is going to be negative 152, plus 18 times 0 is 0. And then negative 38 times 5, negative 190, plus 18 times negative 5, which is negative 90. So altogether I get 4, negative 175, negative 152, and negative 280. So now I want you to multiply in the reverse order. Try C, and I want you to see if you get the same thing as you did multiplying A times B times C. So does multiplication order matter for matrices? Okay. Lastly, I want you to try example 5. I'm going to do the first one for you. Since we've got 3 by 3 and 3 by 3, I can multiply and I get a 3 by 3 out. So in order to do the top left first row, so I'm going to have row 1, row 2, row 3, and again column 1, column 2, column 3. Okay, in order to do this, if I want row 1, column 1, that's this space right here, I'm going to use row 1, column 1. So that's going to give me 3 times 0 plus 4 times negative 4 plus negative 2 times 9. Okay, and you're going to do that for all of the 9, so you'll have 9 spaces all together. And then you can combine and add and do all that stuff.